Now that we have explored different kinds of textures, let's apply them in a painting of some rocks. And we're going to use another painting technique that I'd like to show you, which is called negative painting. And people are often so confused about that. So this is a really great exercise, and it's simple but effective. So grab your supplies and let's get started. Here is my paper. It's a block of Arches cold pressed watercolor paper. It's 140 pound and it's 11 by 14 inches. And you can use whatever size you'd like, and it doesn't have to be a block. A loose piece of watercolor paper will be just fine, and any size that you desire. I will say that try and see if you can get standard sizes. So 8 by 10, 11 by 14, 9 by 12, that kind of size would be great, because if it turns out to be a masterpiece that you want to frame, then you can get a ready-made frame and mats, and it's not going to cost you a fortune. Just a little tip. So first of all, we're going to pick out what colors we want to use, and then we're going to get our paper wet. We're going to do a wet into wet technique, and then we are going to use our spray bottles. I'm going to use water. I am going to use alcohol. And I am going to use some salt, some coarse salt, and probably also some fine salt. That's going to be the supplies that we need for now. And then of course some watercolor brushes. You can choose whatever brushes suit you. Doesn't matter. Don't choose too small of brushes, especially for the beginning here, because that's just putting on the colors and letting them mix and mingle. And so a bigger brush is better. So I'm actually going to go and grab a bigger brush than this. I'm going to use this big mop brush to get both the water on and also some of the paint. And I'll probably go down to this one also. But for the first part, it's just getting paint on paper. That's all it is. As for the colors I'm going to use, I'm actually going to use the same colors that I used for our textures that we experimented with, but I'm going to use them with more water so they're not so saturated. And I'm going to go heavy on the French ultramarine blue burnt sienna combination, and I think I might add on cobalt blue as a third blue. Those are my thoughts. So let's get started. So the first thing I did was I sprayed all the colors I'm going to use, and I'm reusing the clean puddles I have here from our previous exercise. No need to waste precious pigment. And I'm just going to build out my puddles and make them a lot larger, because it's a fairly big sheet of paper I have here, so I want to make sure I don't run out of colors. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to do my puddles, and once we have those done, we'll reconvene. Okay, I got all my puddles of paint prepared. It's important you do that before you start wetting your paper and stuff, because otherwise your paper is going to dry while you work on your puddles. So now I'm going to use my big old mop brush. Just grab whichever, you can be a flat brush too, whatever brush you have that'll hold a lot of water, and let's wet our whole, there's a little hair there, let's wet our whole paper and let the water sink in. And actually you can also use a spray bottle to make it go faster. And I'm just going to wet the whole paper, and then I'm going to let it have a little time to soak in. And here's another little hair. And then I'm going to apply the paints very loosely, and then we're going to let them run a little bit together, and then we're going to watch them start drying. And that's when we are going to add some salt, some water spray, some alcohol spray. In this particular one, I am not going to use my plastic wrap, but you certainly could. There we go. And I'm looking like this to make sure that I have water everywhere. Can you see how shiny my paper is? And even though it's on a block, you can see it does buckle a little bit, but that's okay. We'll live with that. Just gonna let it have a little minute, and then let's start adding some color. So the first one, I'm gonna add a little bit of the cobalt blue, which was not a color that I used in my a texture lesson, but I could have. And here's some French ultramarine blue. So there we have that. And my next color, I'm going to put some burnt sienna on. Can you see how the burnt sienna starts making some lovely grays once it hits our French ultramarine blue and our cobalt blue? See, get some grays. And let's get a little bit of some red in. Be fun. And let's get a little bit of yellow. So we get some kind of orange, and then we get some neutral and some greenish, all not surprising. And let's see here, let's get a little bit, but not too much, of our phthalo blue. And I think I'm gonna try and see how that will mix and mingle before I put any more on. I don't want it too dark because we're gonna add darks later, so I want to give myself lots of room. And so I'm rocking it back and forth to get the colors to flow and mingle. And if your colors are not flowing enough, you can spray into them. That'll be totally in line with what we want to do. And I'm just picking up some of those excess drops that forms. And I'm feeling I want to get a little bit more French ultramarine blue, a couple of places, maybe here. I'm gonna rock this way. And I'm keeping a close eye on what's happening. Fingerprints happening, but that's okay. Any texture we get, we'll just use it to our advantage, right? That's the plan. So I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna start spraying in a little bit of water here. I think I might add in just a little bit of some blue there. There. That fingerprint, let's get rid of it. There. Now there's no rhyme or reason. I'm just thinking rocks. But, you know, rocks can have many colors and nobody says this has to be realistic. That's not a requirement. Whoops. It's kind of a messy process. I hope you can see that. So let's just give it a little time to mix and mingle. And we get some nice neutrals, but I don't want everything to be neutral. I want to have some color. So I'm finding I have a lot of red right up there. So I don't want it just in one area. So let's put some red in here. So that's what I'm starting to think about now. If I see some areas that are, you know, especially if they're out on the edges, you want to make sure that I don't have like a very strong color out on one edge. And so that also makes me think that maybe this one I want to just give it this corner here. I gave it a little burnt sienna. And then I'm going to give it a little spray like that. And then let's rock it the other way. And see, now that's not moving very much up there. I don't want that color right like that, so spray it. So if you have things like that going on, now's the time to take care of it. And see, I'm beginning already to get a little texture from just the spray that I'm spraying in to move color, because some areas are already drying. And again, I'm noticing, I think we noticed that also when we were doing our textures, that the phthalo blue or primary blue cyan, whichever one, it's the same pigment depending on what brand you have it in, it dries very quickly. For some odd reason, it dries faster than some of the other colors. It's a very messy job. Make sure you don't wear a blouse or anything that, you know, you don't want to get splat on, or wear an apron. Often I wear an apron in my studio, but I forgot all about it today because I'm so excited about getting this painting started. So I'm gonna go in, spray on a little bit more water, because I want to get those textures, remember? And I'm gonna let it dry just a little bit more. And then I'm gonna think about where I want to place some salt and also try and give it a few whiffs of alcohol, but I have to wait until it's the right time. So basically what we have to do right now is we have to watch paint dry. How about that? We're watching paint dry. So I'm just wiping down the edges. Okay, we can see the shine is beginning to leave the paper in certain areas. Before we wait too much longer, I think I want to get a little bit of salt in. Maybe here. Now I don't want salt everywhere. A little bit here in the green. So this is the coarse salt that I'm using right now. So I'm being very deliberate with my salt application, not spreading it everywhere. And now I'm going to take my fine salt and get a little bit of that in some areas. So I'm going pretty close to the paper. So a little bit here. I'm going to put a little bit in this brown here. And in this little area, kind of golden. And then I'm going to put a little bit down here. And maybe a little bit here in the red. There. Again, I don't want too much. I want different textures. So let's see if we can maybe get some alcohol sprayed here. So I'm being very careful again, going fairly close to the paper so it doesn't go everywhere. So that's a nice textured area down there. Just gonna try and see if we can do a little bit there. And some of those, see, that's a rock forming there all by itself. That's what I think. Let's try up here. Ooh, 1, 2, 3. Give it a real whiff there. And then I'll do a little bit here. There. So I don't think I want to use any more alcohol. I don't like this. This is too circular. So let me spray another there. And the same here. Just to kind of change it up a little bit. So that's still alcohol. I said I didn't want any more, but yeah, I like it. I like it. So I think we can spray on a little bit more water now. And now I think pretty much I'm going to leave it alone and see what happens. That's going to be the fun part. Might take a little bit more of the fine salt and just put it in a couple of places. We lost some of our alcohol down here. I might have to go back and do that. There, just letting it dry a little bit more. There. Okay, I'm gonna leave it alone now and see what happens. I think we got a really nice texture here. Like the colors, we have a lot of muted colors, and we're gonna get some texture here. Can't really see the salt textures yet, so let's let that dry. So it's time to take a little break, and then we will start finding our rocks when everything is dry and we come back. So I let everything dry overnight, and as you can see with watercolor, the colors dry quite a bit paler than what they look like when you put them on and they're all wet. So first order of business is we're going to take the salt off, and I'm going to use my hand and then a credit card if I have areas where things are sticking. So just make sure all the salt is off, and then we can take a look at the textures that we got. We got some salt textures, and we got some textures from spraying in with the alcohol. We got a little bit of a bleed back there, and here of course it's a little bit here, and we got some granulation a few places where we had the French ultramarine blue and the burnt sienna, and I'm quite happy with what we got. So now it's time to find our rocks, and we are going to bring them out by using negative painting technique. Negative painting means that instead of painting the rock itself, like see here we can say that's a rock, we're going to paint the area around the rock to bring the rock out. So let me just show you how that works. So we're going to use the exact same colors that we used for the original wash so that we have nice color harmony. And let me just try and bring a little bit of that rock out. And I want to match the color to some extent that I have behind there. So I'm going to take a little bit of the red and the burnt sienna, and then I'm going to put a little bit of blue in to kind of gray it down. Something like this. This is fun, trying to just find the right color. And let's not go too dark to begin with. We don't want to go too dark. So let me just catch this edge here. Can you see? So I'm catching that edge of the rock. And now I'm going to rinse out my brush, dab it a little bit so that it's just damp. And then turning my paper around so I don't get my hand in wet paint and so that you can see. Make sure I don't have any droplets on the handle here. And then before it dries, I'm going to take the tip of my damp brush and just run it around into that wash I put down to blur the line. My goal is to have no hard line on this outside of the rock, so I'm just kind of bleeding it away, and you'll have to go back in, rinse your brush out until you're happy. Can you see now that that edge of the rock is much more prominent and it makes the rock kind of stick out? So we're just going to leave it like that for now, and let's see if we can do the same over there on that one. So there we have more of a green. So let's take a little bit of the yellow and we can put it over here. We don't want too bright of a green. I'm going to do it a little bit darker and a little bit more muted. Kind of like that. Again, put a little bit more water in. And then I'm going to go in here and, you know, if you don't want the exact shape that you're left with, you don't have to stick with that. So we do the same thing, find an edge, and then I rinsed out my brush and I'm going to go in with my damp brush before things dry on me, so you know, you can't dilly-dally too much here. And I'm going to let that line bleed out on the outside. So hard line against the rock and soft everywhere else. And now I'm thinking here, I want to split this up like that. Can you see I split that up a little bit, and I'm just going to bleed that out, and then I'm going to bleed out this line on this side, and then it's going to look more or less like there's a little rock that's, you know, lying up against the edge of the bigger rock. I kept it very light for now. We can darken later. Right now we're just finding our rocks. So there's one more here that's quite obvious. So let's put a little bit more blue in here. So you can see I'm using more neutral colors. So that kind of an edge there. Clean out my brush and make sure I don't have a hard edge here on the outside. And I'm also trying to make sure that I don't get all my rocks to be little round potatoes. So I like to vary the shape a little bit because that's how rocks are. I'm going to plop a picture in here so you can see a little sample. I'm not painting from any particular photograph, but it might be helpful for some of you to take a look at some photographs and just kind of get an idea if you're not that familiar with the shapes of rocks. So there's one more that I really would like to bring out. That's down here in the corner. There's going to be a big rock down here. And I'm going to put a little bit more French ultramarine blue in that one. Can you see here? It's a beautiful big rock. I'm going to do it like this. And rinse out my brush. Grab the wet edge. And make that line disappear on the outside. And more water, rinse your brush, more water, rinse your brush. It's very important. All right. Already we're beginning to get some rocks popping out here and there. So I wanted to show you that you might find it easier as we go along if you can do a little pencil mark where you see rocks. If that makes it easier, go ahead and do that. And go here. So I'm just making a couple of pencil marks where I see some good rock shapes. See a nice beautiful one here. Like that. And then here's one. And I see one here. And here. And now I have to decide which goes over, which goes under. So here I just made a few little lines to indicate. So you can see here, let's zoom in. So I marked a whole area here where I see some rocks, and I think this one goes like this. And here's another little one that I want to put in, and it's going to be underneath this one here. Make sure you vary the shapes and the sizes, that's very important. And then here, I think I want to put a big one. That goes like that. And that should be good for right now, so there you can see all the lines that I put in. So now let's define some of those rocks by putting a little bit of negative painting around them. So in here, let's just go with a very bluish color, but muted a little bit. And so now we have a captured negative space, is a space like this. It's called captured negative space. And remember, don't go too dark just yet. No need to go too dark right at this point. Just enough so we can see where our lines are. So here put in a little bit more blue. The next one, gonna warm it up with a little bit of red here. So I'm pretty much trying to follow the local color, meaning the color that's already there. So that's my strategy for right now. That can change later. And I'm also going to go in later and we'll darken some of these areas, but one step at a time. So here I have a little bit more kind of bluish greenish. That's a little too green. A little bit more blue in. And it's just loose that edge. So remember to lose the edges on the outside. And then here there is a rock underneath, so we don't want to go too dark on this, just a little bit, and then there's a little bit to be seen here, like that. And that's a whole rock underneath there. So I want to stay similar to that rock color. There. And here we also have a little bit of, there's a rock underneath that rock and underneath that rock. There. Just darken it a little bit, that's all it takes. Just a little bit darker. And then let's loose the line inside that rock. So I hope you can see how we're building up slowly but surely, rock upon rock. And here we have a dark area, a little dark area like that. And I also think I want to make a rock here. And then we'll loose it. Loose the line there, that's a good rock color there in the corner. Just fine tune that a little bit. So then we also have, it's kind of a yellowy rock here. So here, put a little bit more burnt sienna in, right here. And I want to lose this edge. Change the shape here a little bit. There. You can go in here and define that little bit darker area. Like that. And we can rinse out so we can keep some of that light. Just enough here to indicate what's going on. There. See how we have this whole area already kind of beginning to develop, and now I'm going to continue doing exactly what I did here, and I'm going to just speed up the video a little bit, and I'm going to put some music on because, you know, it's very repetitive doing all this, and you can stop the video wherever, you know, you need to see something a little bit closer, and I will stop now and again and go over what I have painted. So you can either watch it or you can paint along, whatever suits your temperament and your skill level better. There is no wrong way of doing that. So just either watch or paint along and enjoy. Okay, here we go. I'm using a smaller brush now. I'm going to go into those little areas and kind of greenish. Again, trying to keep droplets off the handle and keep my hands out of the wet paint. I'll use that similar color over here. And I'm using the darks here. They're not really dark, they're mid-tones, in a very transparent manner. I wanted to darken a little bit so that it kind of picks up on that gray. And we'll come back to all these areas that we are painting dark right now, because they're going to be even darker, but we have to take it step by step. So here, all those little areas, just give them a little bit of color, and move back to my number 8 brush, and then let's go in and do this one. It's kind of sort of purpley a little bit. Try not to get any lines or hard lines in these areas we're painting darker. And if you get some, it's no big deal, we'll make them into rocks. So just try the best you can. There we go. Now we're getting into rock on rock areas. So I'm just going to do like little triangles almost, and then just blend it out. Just get a little separation, but at this point it doesn't have to be that much. And some of them you have to decide which is on top and which is below. The shadow side goes like here, so this one's on top, so then I put a little shadow on the one underneath, and then again lift it out, and that again will be deepened later. Later we'll deepen that. And see, it's underneath this rock, but it's on top of this rock. So as I get the rocks a little defined, I'm gonna erase some of my pencil lines and just drew in another one there. Let's see, and I think maybe it'd be kind of fun to have one coming in like that. There. Let's define a little bit more here, needs some definition. That. Where's my brush? And here also need to define like that. This one here, we'll let that edge be on top of this one here. And here. So basically you can also tell yourself light against dark, dark against light. That's another way of looking at it. And then right away, let's get rid of those hard lines. Something darker there. There we go. And here. A little bit of that more brown, but make it grayer. Dab some over here. Get some unity. And we'll darken this whole area. Just a little bit. It's just maybe a shade max. Max. And then I want to take a little bit of that green, dab it in here, a couple of places. While it's still wet. Dab up a little bit here, just to make sure I don't get a bleed back. We need to darken there. Let's see, here. And rinse it out. Just like that. And then that same color can go here, so that little rock can be on top. There we go. We need to get this one defined a little bit more. I might put a little bit of, just a hint of yellow in there to just brighten up the color right there on that edge. I'm going very subtle because we can always go brighter and, you know, more intense. And here's another little edge that needs a little attention, right there. And then go right there. Cleanse out our brush. And then needs a little bit more right there. And again, I might put a little bit of yellow in, just to brighten it right there on that edge. And then here it needs to be darker on this edge. Yellow in. Tap in a little bit more darkness. And actually, I think this is so wet. Let's try and see if we can get a little salt action here the second go round. That would be kind of fun. No idea if it will work, but we'll give it a try. So I hope you're having a lot of fun with this. So let's take a look. Everything is dry and I put some salt on there and I don't think it did much, but that's to be expected. A little tiny bit of texture maybe I got. Little tiny bit of texture, nothing much. Now I could say that I'm done with creating more rocks, but I personally am not quite done. Maybe you're done with yours. That's up to you. I'm going to put another one in here, and I also see one here, and I see one here. So we're building on layers after layer. So we did that one, and then I think I see one in here. So you can go and put as many rocks or as few rocks as you feel. That is, you know, there's no right and wrong here. You can do bigger rocks, you can do smaller rocks, whatever floats your boat. So I just put a few more in. Really want to have one here too. It's like that. And I think I want to do one that comes like this. And it looks like it overlaps down here. So right now I'm using, instead of a graphite pencil, I'm using this Copy Not NP Blue from Prismacolor color erase. You don't have to have one of those. They just happen to be here right now, so that's what I'm going to be using. Oh, I think I want to put one in here too. Just one little rock that is kind of sticking out there. Okay, and then, you know, it's the exact same thing that we've been doing all along. We're just putting a little bit of negative painting around the shapes that we marked, and it doesn't have to be much. So here, for instance, have this little one, and then there's a little bit on this side. Rinse out my brush, and before it dries I lose the edge on the outside. So same old, same old. I hope that you find this like I do. I find this very meditative, but you know, maybe you don't have the same feeling about it. I don't know. So here, remember I put a little, I wanted to put a rock in here, and then I'm going to go on the other side and also just put a little color around. Rinse my brush with a damp brush, just kind of loose the edge on the outside like that. And I'm going to put some music on again, and then I'm going to do the last rocks here and just speed it up a little bit, and you can follow along as you please. Once you have your rocks defined so that you can find them, if you still have some pencil lines, you can take your kneaded eraser and just take care of those, and just want to make sure that you don't do it if the paint is still wet. Of course, then you can rip the paper and you can smudge your colors and stuff, so that's not advisable. And I still have some lines that I'm probably going to need still, because I haven't really defined in here what's what. For instance here, so I have this rock, and it's going underneath this rock and that rock. It's on top of that rock. So I think it's going to come out kind of like here. So there's going to be a little tiny dark spot there. Once we build up the layers as we are, there's going to be more and more of these little dark spots. And they're golden, because that's what's going to help give our painting a lot of depth. Like there, you see, we have that defined. Then we'll have some areas where we have some little fixing to do of shapes. I just wanted to darken that corner a little bit to begin to give it a little bit more depth. There's also an area where I haven't really defined how those two rocks, that one and that one, on top of this one that I just put a little bit of shadow on. So there's a whole bunch of those that need to be defined, and you don't have to go too heavy-handed, just a little bit to start with, just so you can find out what's what. And then we'll go in and give some more depth to our rocks and to the layer underneath. Here we can go in and do a little bit more. Here we can start building a little bit more darkness down here in this little area. Defines the rocks a little bit more, and then we can go and do a little bit like that to separate that rock from the ones that are overlapping it. And in the end stage, we can also, and we'll go in, and then we are going to also lift out some highlights, because that's also very useful in creating depth. Here, let's get some depth in here. This rock is on top of this little rock, so we put a little tiny bit of a shadow on there. And there we have this little rock is lying on top. And this rock is on top of that rock. And that rock is also on top of this rock. So let's give that some more depth. So now you can see I've switched to a smaller brush. This is my number 4 round brush. Just because I'm working in some smaller areas. And I can use that same color on the other side, because on this side here, there's also this rock and that rock that's on top of this one here. Here, first of all, there's a little captured negative space here, so that's already going to help. So keep that a little bit darker, and there's another space, so I can use that same color. So it's just a red with a little bit of blue in. So there's that. And then this rock here is on, that rock is on top, and it's below these two. Rinse out our brush. Let's get rid of this line before it dries on us. And let's get rid of this line before it dries on us. There. And then there's this rock here is underneath. Actually there's another little captured negative space. Let's capture that first. This one ran in a little bit. Let's pick that up. Here, I lost it. Sometimes it's a good idea to put your finger on where you're working, because as it gets more complex, it's easy to lose your way. And then I feel like we can maybe even darken this little area. There. And here, we can darken in here. And then we can lose the edge. Lose the edge there. Can you see how that gave more depth to that area here? In my painting, I think I've kept the brightest colors there. So I want to make this the focal area. And this is a secondary focal area because we have some good patterns and stuff. So that'll be good. Here's another area that we can beef up a little bit. And again, this is the area I'm talking about. To say that that tip of that rock is overlapping this rock. And then just lose the edge on it. There. There's that. I also have here, I haven't separated those two, so I'll do that now. And right away, before it dries. So especially if you're living in a dry climate like I am, you can't dilly-dally too much. And then here, I also need to tell which rock is on top of which rock. So this rock here is below that rock. And again, lose the edge with a damp brush. There. And then this rock here is below a whole bunch of rocks. So let's give that a little bit more depth. Actually, there's a captured negative space right here first. So that's going to help a little bit. And let's beef up the contrast here in that area. And then let's go in here and tell the viewer what's what. This rock is below these other rocks. There. Can even fine tune a little bit. There. And slowly but surely things are taking shape. See, here's another area that was kind of needed to be just fine tuned a little bit. Actually darken this whole area now. And then this rock here is below. This rock is below that rock. And let's lose the edge. Darken a little bit here to indicate that this rock is on top of that rock. And lose the edge. Go. But then it's below this other rock on this end. So you see how that, a rock can be below one rock and then on top of another rock. It's also below this one. There we go. And here I want to tell a story about this rock here being below that rock. So I gave everything a chance to dry, and I also used my kneaded eraser to erase some of the pencil lines as best I could. And I could continue on this same process for several hours, but I'm not going to because we need to move on. And I just wanted to show you a couple of other little lessons that you can learn from this painting exercise. We are going to bring out a little bit of shape and differentiation on the rocks, so we just can see a little bit better which rock is on top and which one is at the bottom. We've already done a few of those. I'm just going to do a couple more, but not too many, because as I said, we need to kind of move this little show on. So get our brushes ready. It's a really good idea to have a second brush for losing the edges. And again, be careful with these droplets on the shaft. Take those off. And don't have your brush here to lose the edges dripping wet. And see, here I also had some droplets. So anyway, let's go in here. This is my focal area of the painting. So I want to put a little bit more drama here. So that means we want a little bit more dark and a little bit more light against dark, so the lighter areas lighter and the darker areas darker than some of the other areas. Can you see? So I just went in, put a little bit more of that color on. I also want to keep the colors a little bit cleaner here, a little bit brighter, because it's going to draw your eye in, the viewer's eye in. And again, make sure you don't have it too wet. This was actually too wet, so went on a towel and took some of that off. And let's just pull some of this out like this. And we can do one more up here, just right here. And let's just get that like that. And so you can see now this rock is much more on top. Now we need to get on here and also put a little bit more differentiation on. And so I'm gonna find a darker color. This is a lot darker, but that's okay, as long as I only put a little bit on. And then right away go in with my loose the edge brush, my damp brush, to pull out that color like that. There, like that. And I feel like I want to also do it here on this side, like that. And I could just use the same color. It's kind of red with some blue in it to kind of darken it. And yeah, And we can do one other area on this rock, because this rock is also underneath this other blue rock. So let's bring that out. And again, clean damp brush. And let's bring that out. Like that. And it's also over here. So let's give it a little bit of color there. And pull it out. There. That's good enough. And now we have that rock. Can you see that area? This rock is clearly on top. And this rock is also clearly on top of that one. Now, another thing that we can do that I want to show you. It's not always, we don't want to end up with a picture that then gets darker and darker and darker. That's not really what I'm after. So sometimes you need to grab a brush with clean water, take some of the water off here, and no droplets on the ferrule. And then with that damp brush here, can you see I'm going in and I'm putting a little bit of water on. And then I'm very gently scrubbing back and forth, very gently. And then I'm taking my tissue and I'm dabbing off the paint that I loosened. And you can repeat this. And I'm not using a scrubber brush or anything like that. Just using a regular brush, because if I want to scrub, that's something I want to do at the very end if I need some more highlights, because then you often damage the paper. And then once you go and maybe paint that same area, you're going to get some weird texture going on that you don't want, and you will not be able to lift that color back out again because you've damaged the paper. Can you see how that brought that rock up a little bit in that area there? And so that's something you can do, and I could do the same here. For instance, again, just need to have a little water on, and then let's put a little bit water on here and just gently scrub. Let it sit for just a moment and dab it off. And some colors, you can see here it lifted pretty well. Here it didn't lift quite as well. And that has to do with how staining or non-staining your colors are. And I feel like maybe in here would be a good area, because that's also on top. So in this area in general, I want a little bit more light, because that's going to draw the viewer's eye. So it's better to do some of this separation with lifting out instead of adding color on to darken. Hope that makes sense. Can you see? And it's not that much, but it's enough. I hope you can see it's enough to kind of give it some impact. And again, I want to do just a little bit more. You can repeat this, and then make sure that your tissue that you are dabbing off with is clean. Otherwise, you're just going to dab color back on again. We don't really want that. So that was a nice little exercise in getting some of that differentiation with lifting up. And then so here, I'm going to go in and put a little bit more dark on right here. Again, it's this push and pull, and have my other brush damp, ready to loosen the edges. I had too much water on. So there's that. And I want to go into this little corner and do the same. And you can see I'm always choosing a color that is usually somewhat in the family of the color that's already there. That makes it easier. It's not the only way of doing it, but it makes it easier. So here I also feel that we should put a little bit more color on right there where those two rocks meet there. And we can go in here and darken this even more right here, and again loose the edge. And I have one other area here. This area needs a little more oomph, so to speak. So let's give it a little bit more oomph there, and then loose the edge. There's that. And here, I think I can get away with this. I don't think this was, no, it had already dried. You want to make sure you don't do these things next to, damp areas, because then you're going to get in trouble. Then down here, I've got to separate here. I actually think I need to go even darker right here. There. And this is out on the edge, so it's not a very important area. But still. There we go. And I have one more that I would like to separate. And it's this one here. I didn't really tell which rock was on top of which rock, and it's a toss-up. Sometimes, you know, it could go either way. Then it's up to you, the artist, to decide what's up. So I'm going to go in here and also darken here. There. Loose that a little bit. And then here, loose the edge. And after a little while, you know, you start having pigment on your brush, so you need to clean it out. And here, I want to make sure I don't get extra pigment on there, so I lift it out a little tiny bit. So, let's see. I think that's pretty good for now. Explained a lot of those areas a little bit better, and that's all we're doing. We're explaining some of these things to our viewer, and I can see I dripped over here. That's okay. And let's see, I think there's one other area here that I would like to separate a little bit more, and I'm going to go a little bit more neutral on that area. See here. And again, let's loose the edges. Like that. Can you see it's a little bit harder because I had a little bit more of a color differentiation here. It's okay though, but makes it a little harder. I'm going to lift out there. And let's do that same color, little corner over here. There we go. And then there might be, has a lot of this very blue, and I feel I don't have hardly any of that blue going on over here. So I just would like to repeat just a little bit. So I'm just going to glaze this rock with a little bit of that primary blue or phthalo blue green shade, whichever one you have, or whatever, you know, colors you have in yours, doesn't matter. Can you see I'm just giving it a glaze, so that's a lot of water and very little pigment, and it's just enough so that it changes color, but I can still see what's underneath. I like that so much that I think I might do it over here too, on this one. And again, just like that. Just to give a little bit of that. Not too much. We don't want, you know, areas fighting with each other. We want them supporting each other. So I want to put a little bit of that on here too. Just a little bit. Just a little bit, like that. Barely anything. There. There. That's good. And then we have this green over here, and we hardly have any green on this side here. So let's put a little bit of green. So let's do that here. Start with the green here, where we wanted to put a little extra shadow and color on. So let's do that like this, and just pull it out. And we're just glazing and just changing the tone slightly, not too much, slightly. Dab in a little bit more down there, and then just pull it out. Pull it out. It almost did it by itself. Look at that. And feel we need to darken a little bit here on this one. There's a little corner here that could be a lot darker, like that. And it also can go around here. Darken there. And then let's just make it disappear, the lines, and just like that. And actually need a little bit more here to put that out. That's where we put that highlight in, remember? Put that highlight in here. So let's darken underneath it, so that's, you know, we get both darker and lighter. And let's really give it a little pizzazz here. There. And that'll give it even more. That'll give it even more. You can do like that. more drama. We're after a little bit of drama now. And let's put a little bit more drama on here. This area could use a little bit more pizzazz. And you can see I could just keep going and going and going, but I'm not going to. You get the picture now. So, you know, you'll be experts in negative painting and losing edges and push-pull with darkening some areas and lightening other areas. That's what you're experts in now. I think that's good. I actually feel like putting a little bit of yellow in here just to give it a little color variance. It's kind of very dull. And again, that's, you know, kind of in my focal area, so give it a little bit more pizzazz. Yeah. And actually lift out just a little bit, whoops, a little bit of light there. Okay, that's that. And now we're really going to kick up the drama. This is such a fun part. So I'm going to clean my palette, let everything dry again, just so I don't mess up and go into areas that might still be a little damp. Okay, so I cleaned off my palette a little bit and I got a couple of new puddles out. French ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, and I have a little out here and I have a little out here. And then I left some of the other colors that are semi-pure just in case we need them. And now comes a really, really fun and important part. So I'm going to go to a little bit of a smaller brush. It's a number 8. This is also a number 8, but this one has just a little bit of a better tip. And you might need a brush that has a good tip. So I'm going to start mixing these two colors, but not like all together. I like to have them so I can kind of adjust. And what we're going to do is going to have a huge impact. So this is going to be building up the super dark little areas in between the rocks, and you're going to see how that absolutely makes the rocks stand out. I love this part because it just has such a big impact, and it's not difficult because we've already established all the areas where our rocks are. So now we're just going in and building up on that, so that we can really get these rocks to stand out. And so there was one area, here's another area, and when you get to the smaller areas, just don't hesitate to, you know, bring in a smaller brush. It's totally fine. So this is, you know, painted in wet on dry, wet paint, but dry paper. And we're gonna have a little tiny bit of transparency still. So some of that tone or color that's underneath is going to kind of shine through, and so that'll just give that little bit of variation in the colors, but they're really dark and neutral basically. So here, and this is also where you have the opportunity to you know, fix some shapes if you have some shapes that were not ideal. And here I can decide that maybe this rock underneath goes just to there, and there's something underneath again. I like that. And I'm just going to take this outer area also while I'm at it. And here, you know, make sure you turn your paper so that you don't get your hands in wet paint and start smearing it around. That can happen so easily. It happens to me all the time when I'm not thinking. So this is super fun and super easy. It can be kind of meditative, and you can grab a little bit of a smaller brush if you have areas, like for instance I see here a little area where I need it to go in to a little tiny like area like that, and I have the same here like that. Here is also a little area, so I can fine tune that when I'm at it. There's a little fix there. There. I hope you can already see, and then here is a tiny little, there's a couple of tiny little areas right here where I just need a little brush with a good tip to get in and darken. And the same here. It's already very dark, but now it's really, really dark. that. There you go. And I have one other little area here. And right now I'm working around the area that's, you know, my focal area. So that's where I want a lot of drama. And I get the drama by the little bit clearer colors, but mainly through the contrast between light and dark. Light against dark, dark against light. That's a little mantra you can say to yourself. And it's gonna go in and just also darken this area. This block here, I don't know if you can see how it lifted up. The glue on these blocks are not always that great. I'm noticing. Didn't used to have those problems, but it seems like the last few blocks that I have bought of these arches have been not as good in the glue department. And see, I'm just going in here, building up those darks. And then when I get to the smaller areas, just grab my small little brush, that, and I can get all the way up to the edge of the rocks. So I'm just going to finish this little area and then we're going to take a look. So these two rocks are not touching. And try to avoid getting any brush strokes showing. I mean, this will fix it if they happen, but we try to avoid it. I'm dabbing in a little bit more of the blue. And then I'm just going to take my little one here. Just finish off this area. There we go. And then let's take a look. Can you see the difference between here and here? Huge difference. See how much more dramatic that is? So I'm going to go and do all those little areas in the same manner, and then we'll reconvene and you can do the same. So happy painting while you do that. Put some good music on, or sometimes I like to even listen to a podcast or something like that. Whatever floats your boat, do that, and we'll see each other when we all have the darkest dark painted in. So here you can see I darkened all the areas and they're almost black. And you can see how that made the rocks really pop out. And I'm going to show you a couple more things that you can do if you want to give it even more dimension. And as I already showed you, you can lift out some highlights to create a little bit more dimension. So for instance here I could lift out a little bit of a highlight here because this rock is resting on that rock. So it would be, you know, closer to us, and we can make it a little lighter. Light brings forward and dark pushes down, as you can see. So that's called, you know, that's how you can create some atmospheric perspective in watercolor with light versus dark. So can you see how that popped that part of the rock up a little bit? And I might even go and do a little bit more here, because this whole edge would probably be catching a little bit more light. And so that's one way. And then of course I've already showed you another way you can do it. And so I'm going to do it here. And I'm going to just grab a little bit of a bluish color. Of course now I want to stay fairly local in the color choice. So I've already beefed this up a couple of times, I think, but that's okay. You can keep layering as many times as you like. There is no limit to that. So let's see here how that goes. Great. So there we got a little bit more. Just make sure I don't get any lines there. There. And I can darken this rock, this little rock underneath here. I want to do it even darker. Here, like that, and push. Oops, let's get some of all that excess water out. There's that. And I could lift out a little bit right here on this other edge. And there you can see another one. That would be really good to darken more. And that's here. So this rock, so I'm going to go the whole way here. And then I rinsed out my brush. Might have a little bit too much water on it. Just take that off. And then here, like that. And it would actually also probably be a lot darker right here in this little corner. Let's give that some pizzazz. And again, if you don't enjoy doing this, you've already learned the lesson, you know, so you don't have to, you can leave yours more abstracted and not so, you know, detailed. Whatever floats your boat, there. And I feel that this rock here also could benefit from a little more color right here, right there. Rinse out my brush, dab it, get the water in so we can get those colors flowing. I think I might just want to put a little bit more on right there. Just dab in like this. I think that's good. So I hope you can see how we created a little bit more depth there. And I might just do a couple more. Let's do this one here. I'd like to create a little bit more depth here. And I'm going to go all the way around here. There. And I can get a little bit green in here. Might have been too much, but that's okay. And let's loose the edge. That was way too much water on. If you get that, just pick, you know, back on the towel. And here, I think I want to darken even more here. So I'm just dabbing in a little bit more, put a little bit more blue in that brown to make it darker. And actually go up here too. Really push it down. And now with a damp brush, just make sure we loose those edges. And we can also tip it a little bit. We want to give it a little bit more room to run. There. And then this one here. So you can see one rock leads to another rock. One rock speaks to another rock and says, okay, now that you push, then I want to push a little bit more. So this little rock here really want to get pushed down in this corner, and then we can lighten it up in the other, at the top of this rock. And that'll also give the rocks more dimension so they don't look flat. So there's that. And then while we're at it, we're going to just gently scrub a little bit right here on this part of the rock that's on top of that one, because it's going to be closer to the light. So that top of that rock will catch a little bit of light, and see, that brought it towards us. And then we can push down that rock underneath, but we probably have to wait a little bit. So while we wait for that, let's go in and push this rock down. Let's see if we can do it without getting any runbacks into the area just worked on. I think I can get away with it. Just make sure I don't get my brush too wet. There. And clean my brush. I want to make sure that this part of this rock still stays light, so I'm going to lift that out again. There. I like it. And let's see, we have one more that I could push down here. Right here. There we go. And just, again, we can maybe lift out a little bit right here. Lighten that part of it. There. And then this rock here underneath. All these rocks, let's give that some darkness. And clean out brush, dab it, and then just loose that edge. And then make sure we get maybe a little bit of a highlight right in here on the center of the rock to bring that up a little bit, round it. Can you see that? That comes up, and I pushed it down on the edges. Now here, I think it's safe to work over here now. And so here, really want to push this rock down, really darken it right there and there. And then loose the edge and keep that highlight we put in there. And actually, I feel like sometimes you can put in a little bit of yellow in your highlights, just a little bit, like I'm doing right here. That can kind of warm it up and do some good stuff. Just change the color a little bit. There, this one, let's push that way down. So you also have to think about that as far as color goes with push-pull. Warm colors like light brings forward in close-ups like this, and cool colors pushes down. So you can also use that to your benefit, and that's why, you know, sometimes the highlighted areas, if you put a little bit of yellow in, that kind of helps that. So I could go on and on and on, but I'm not going to, because I think this is good enough. Looking at it through the camera, yes, I think we have developed that area pretty well. And now comes my very favorite thing. So you want to have some tissue in one hand and a damp brush, not dripping wet, and no of those little droplets on the ferrule. And then we can go in to some of these really dark areas and just find some little rocks that are lying down there. Can you see that? So then we go down underneath. You can, and you know, vary the size, and you just dab like that. Look at that. And so since I used French ultramarine blue and the burnt sienna for my dark mix, those are both non-staining colors, so that means that they're easy to lift. So I can go in and just very easily lift out some little pebbles that are down here in the darkness, and some of them will catch the light a little bit. And they can go under. Remember that you don't want them just all separate. And so here's a little one. And some of them you can barely see, and some of them are very visible. Here's one, goes off the page. But is that fun or what? That is the most fun, I think. Here's one little one. And then here is just a little tiny one. One that's a little bit bigger, or goes under that one. See, it just like they're not very defined. Just little areas that catches the light. So here's one. I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. Just lift it out like that. And then you lift down to that color that was underneath, and we had different colors underneath, so then automatically your little pebbles here will have different colors. So that's also super fun. And one is up here. And you can dip more than you can, do it more than once if you find it necessary. Here's a big one coming off here. Go under there, just like that. So you can see I'm just lifting out the last little rocks that I want to create here. And try and make sure that you have them random, random little rocks underneath here. Bigger, smaller, close together, far apart, disappearing underneath. some of the original rocks and that kind of stuff. Okay, I think I'm pretty good on my little rocks here. Maybe I want to have another one up here that kind of goes under here. See, then I just butt it up to an existing rock, let it sit for just a second and dab it out. Voila! Then the last thing I think I want to do is grab another clean little towel, paper towel or Kleenex. I like to use Kleenex for this kind of stuff, and I'm just going to lift out a few little highlights on some of the rocks that are resting on top of another rock. Here I need to make a little bit more of a differentiation. This is kind of looks like on the even plane, I feel. So let's scrub a little bit more and see that it sit for just a moment. That usually helps. And then just like that. Yeah, that's good. Extend it a little bit. There. Here I have an area where I have not really defined what's what. It's like they're butting up to each other. So let's put a little bit of shadow on this rock here. Just to say that that one is barely beneath the other one. That one. And a little bit more there. Just want to make it a little darker right here. And just there. And actually I could do the same over here, because that's also a little wishy-washy. There. It's not a big difference, but it's enough. Especially if I then lift out some highlights from, let's do like that. If I lift out some highlights from the rocks that are on top. This one's on top of this one also, so I can lift this highlight a little bit further. Actually, you can go all the way here. Like that. Lift that out. And then here, let's lift out here a little bit. It's quite light as it is, but I can lift out a little bit more. There. And I have another area here that really, this one really needs a little lifting out. And it helps if you just, again, just gently, I'm just using a regular brush, not using a scrubber brush or anything. I mean, you could, as the very last thing you do, you could use a scrubber brush. A scrubber brush is a brush that has a little bit shorter and stiff bristles. So sometimes, like even getting a brush that's meant for oil painting or acrylics, they're usually a little bit stiffer. Or just cheap brush from the hardware store can also do it. And you can buy special scrubber brushes. They tend to cost more if they're called scrubber brushes than if you have a brush that's pretty much the same, just for something else. You can also, the ones for fabric painting that you can get at Joann's or Michael's or one of those places, they're also a little stiffer. Then here, just lift out here a little bit, and you can see it's easy to get carried away with these things. And then there's a place here where we really, this little edge needs to be lifted out a little bit. This edge. There. Just like that. And up here, I could lift out a little bit on this red rock here, on the edge that is resting on all those little rocks. Just to give it a little bit more pizzazz. And then this one, we can extend this highlight we already lifted out down to going all the way down here, because it's on top of all these other rocks. So let's just give it a little bit more light. See, it's not much, but every little bit helps. You want to lift up a little bit more here. That. Okay, I think, I could go on and on and on, but I'm not going to, because we're going to wrap this up. Lots of great lessons in this painting with the rocks. And of course, if you like a lot more realistic, you know the road. You lift up more, you push down more. You can give the rocks more shape by, darkening the edges that are going away from the light. And you can push the rocks underneath down by putting a little bit more dark on. And whatever you do, always remember to lose the edges inside. I'm going to give this one a little highlight right here in the middle. Keep the edges inside the rocks soft, and then we have all the hard edges, and you can keep finding, going down layer after layer after layer. You can do the same with branches or leaves or flowers, and the list is endless. There's one little rock here that's just kind of is calling out to me and saying it wants a little bit more definition, so I'm gonna give it to it. See, it's this one here. Of course, it was kind of a little bit wishy-washy. So yeah, so you can see here when I face in these other paintings I've done where I've used the negative painting technique, either for the whole painting, or some of them, I just use it for a little area. So it's all up to you. So I have a little bonus lesson. I'm gonna share a secret with you. It's not really a secret, but it's a little trick I have in my arsenal. If I have a painting where I feel that I kind of didn't get a real good focal area for the viewer to first look at, I call it, it's a wallpaper painting. So it's like everything is kind of like equally important. And that is not really a great composition or design for a painting. You kind of want to lead the viewer into your most important part, and then their eyes will wander through the painting. And so here I feel this painting is a little bit borderline on that. It's kind of busy. If I want to tone it down and focus the viewer's eye to one particular area, say this is the most important area, and I felt all along that this is it because that's where I have the brightest colors. How do I do that when I finish the painting? How do I do that if I feel that, it's all too samey and there's no real direction for the viewer to go? Here's the secret. You can tone down the outer area, so it's basically the edges and the corners, and that way it'll seem like there's more contrast in the focal area. So what you need is a big brush. It can be this type of a brush. It can also be a flat wash brush. It's very important that it can hold a lot of water and pigment, and that the bristles are very soft. See how these, they don't really, move. It's wet. So very soft brush, and it's good to have a second brush clean or as a standby. And then you need, I like to use cobalt blue for this, and you need a big puddle of a very thin wash of cobalt blue. Put a little bit more water in. And then you need to be brave. Yes, and that can be hard. So I have my brush here. I have my very watered down cobalt blue mixture here. And I'm just gonna start down here. And you have no brushing back and forth, as few brush strokes as possible, because you do not want all the paint to start, lifting up and getting into a muddy mess. We just want to put a veil over this area. So, and keep the brush very wet so that you don't have to go back and forth. And then I have this other brush, and I just do one corner at a time. I don't really want a line like that. I want to just diffuse it, just like we did in the original painting. Make sure it's clean water, otherwise, it's not going to work. And so now I can go here and maybe do this other corner and up the side here. And again, I'm going to take my clean damp brush and I'm just going to make sure that I don't get like a hard line. And make sure you clean it and go a little bit further. And here, just don't want any lines. And we don't want the paint underneath to loosen. Okay? So now I kind of push these corners down a little bit. Let's see, I needed a little bit more there. And you can go gently, gently and just darken a little bit while it's still damp. So here, let's also push down here. Push this corner down. And then take my clean brush. You gotta be quick with this stuff. Take my clean brush. Oops, I can see I have a line there and a line there. Don't want that. And then my clean brush, damp brush, and I just go over it with that clean damp brush just to make sure I don't get any hard lines anywhere. There we go. And now we just have one corner left. Try not to see, I just got my hand in here. I don't think anything happened, but be careful with that. Wipe that off. And you can also take a clean tissue and just dab in a couple of places just to make sure you don't get any lines. And then we have one more area to go, and so I want to make sure I have enough cobalt blue on my brush here. And then we need to push in here, so I want to go like this. And now what clean water, and I'll kind of rinse out this big brush, clean water, and just has to be damp enough to move that line away. There we go. I think we need maybe a little bit here. There. I think this is about right. And see a little area here. There. And you can dab out a little bit of a highlight in a couple of places if you need to. You have a line there? No. Okay. I think I succeeded. Can you see now? This is more visible, and you know, we're going to let it dry, but I didn't lose anything in these outer areas. I can still see everything I did. There's a hair here. See if we can get that off. There. But it's toned down just a smidgen, and that makes this area stand out a lot more. And you can use this method in any type of a painting. Landscapes, I've done it in landscapes too. And it works like a charm. And so that is my little secret weapon if I feel that I kind of sort of lost my definition, or my not my definition, but my focal area. You can see some of these rocks here. Got a little bit more toned down, but that's all fine. Yeah, I like it. I like it better now, and now I'm just going to let it dry, and then I'm going to let you take a look, and I'm going to try, and I took a picture before I did this, of this painting, and then I'm going to put them next to each other so you can kind of see what you think. So here you can see the finished painting with the little adjustments that I made, with that bleeding out the corners and the edges a little bit to bring focus to my focal area. So that was just a little extra tip for you in case you have paintings where you feel that you sort of lost a focal area. I hope you found this helpful, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Happy painting!